Perfect.
Okay, great. Pull the screen over. There we go. Okay. So thank you very much, Claudine, for the introduction, and thank all of you for the opportunity to be with you today and share some of my experience with evaluation and specifically with graphical logic modeling. On this first screen here, I've included a quote, which I think is especially relevant to the purpose of this session. It's from Darwin. And it's basically, we can design the best study with rigorous methods and sophisticated analyses, but if we don't pay attention to the data and continuously improve and adapt based on those data, we're really setting ourselves up for failure or not taking advantage of the opportunity that we have in front of us. So evaluation research to me is about optimizing the chances for success in our work so that our work and programs can serve people and help them and also so we use resources wisely. I was going to tell you a little bit about my background. I don't think I need to do that because Claudine pretty much covered everything. I will just mention Claudine mentioned I'm director of the Interdisciplinary Evaluation Science program at the University of Delaware. We're a pretty new program there. We offer a graduate certificate in program evaluation, a graduate certificate in applied research methods, and also a master's of science in interdisciplinary evaluation science. And all of these programs are 100% asynchronous. So over the next hour, I'm going to introduce embedded evaluation. It's a type of theory-based evaluation, as well as logic modeling as a method to depict program theory, and a software package called DE-CTR that can be used for logic modeling. First, before I get started, I want to explain what I mean by the term program when I use that throughout this presentation. It's when I use the term program, I'm using it very broadly to encompass a project you might be working on, a focused intervention you're studying, a large program, or even a policy. So when I use program, think about all of those things. I'm going to explain the embedded evaluation model, which logic modeling is a part of, and then I'll introduce some software called DE-CTR that can be used to create a graphical representation of a logic model, and then I'll briefly discuss how program theory in the logic model that represents that theory can be used to embed evaluation into a program. And finally, I'll do a demonstration of DE-CTR so you can get a feel for how it works. At any time, I'd like for this to be casual. At any time, if you have a question or you want me to clarify something, please just chime in. You don't need to wait until the end. So embedded evaluation is an approach to an evaluation that's based on program theory. The premise of embedded evaluation is that evaluation is ongoing. It's about informing decision-making and a means towards continuous improvement of the work that we do, which in turn would lead to improved outcomes. The model is grounded in continuous improvement. My bachelor's is in engineering from the University of Virginia, and that engineering approach has really focus the work that I do in evaluation and help me to define this methodology. And I think you'll see that engineering approach in here. Early work I did on TQM, quality improvement, continuous improvement is evident in the model. Embedded evaluation is based on theory, the theory behind a program, so the rationale that links what you're doing to the outcomes that you expect. It's focused on utilization, the use of data by intended users. And it's also dynamic and cyclical. Even though I use the term step, it's not really a linear process. But as you know, with the work that you do with research, you start your research, you implement it, you learn, and then you go back through the process again. There are 5 steps. The first is defining the program, what we're studying, and then planning the work, the research, the evaluation that we're doing, and then implementing that research, interpreting the results, and then using those results to inform future research and to refine the theory, the model that we've based this work on. We're going to start with the define step. To me, it's the most important step in evaluation. Understanding your program is critical, really, to the measurement of outcomes. And then I'll touch briefly on the plan step, which is about how you would embed the measurement of outcomes into the logic model that you create. So the components of defining a program really rely on three pieces of information: the goals, what you hope to accomplish with your work; the strategies, what you're doing to accomplish those goals; and the theory, why you think those strategies will result in those goals. It's really making explicit why you're doing what you're doing. So as opposed to simply saying, am training people, I'm getting some equipment, I'm doing all these things, and I hope to have certain outcomes, you're really making explicit along the way the outcomes you expect to see in order to reach the long-term goal. So in writing program goals, I just wanted to show the way that I write program goals for the purpose of evaluation. So I write program goals as measurable outcomes. Get you one step closer to evaluating when you start building evaluation into your model. So here are a few examples, and notice the first word for each goal is written as decreased, increased, improved. Um, so these are not strategies. These are not what the program will be doing. It is what the program hopes to accomplish by doing what it's doing, and also includes the direction of that change. So if we have a program that focuses on teenage pregnancy, the goal might be decreased pregnancy rate. If we have a program that focuses on improving fertility for couples who have had trouble conceiving, the goal might be increased incidence of pregnancy. I try to push some of the goals, our long-term goals, out, and I'll talk about that a little bit later as well, just so your logic model represents the real important why of the work that you're doing. It may be that your research is not going to get all the way to measuring that long-term goal of your work, but it's important as a communication tool that a logic model shows what that long-term goal is, what your work hopes to inform. Is it going to be an improved treatment for diabetes? Is it going to decrease the incidence of diabetes? I do a lot of work with programs for people with disabilities, and one of the long-term goals we often has improved quality of life for people with disabilities. It might be improved developmental monitoring, which is, I'll show you, well, the example I show you will be about developmental monitoring. So these are examples of how I write goals for logic modeling. And then the strategies is just a list of what the program is doing. I like to have for my logic model between 4 and 7 strategies, usually 1 to 3 goals, 4 to 7 strategies. And if I have a lot more activities that are part of the program, I'll cluster those into groups. So a strategy might be a group of activities. And then if I have, a lot of goals, some of those goals are probably more like intermediate outcomes. I'll look at the most important goals. So I have a manageable set of 1 to 3 goals. And again, I'll show you an example in a bit. So some examples of strategies might be equipment funding or laboratory equipment that's needed for your work, funding for research. Um, if you have certain people that you need to hire as part of the work that you're doing, people with a certain skill set, if you have training or mentoring, certain partnerships, these are all strategies that your program puts into place that contribute to you reaching your long-term goal. So moving on to program theory, which is what links our strategies to long-term goals. Really, the key, I think, to effective evaluation research is to understand your program, to understand the project that you're working on, which includes understanding why it's supposed to work. So I think this cartoon's a little funny because it talks about you have certain things at the beginning, and then there's a miracle, and then you have the results that you hope for, or you hope you have the results you hope for. Um, But what we're going to do is explicitly state the program theory. It's about opening that black box. If you're familiar with evaluation, you might hear people talk about black box evaluation, and that's evaluation where somebody has certain things that they're doing and certain outcomes they want, and if they measure those outcomes and they're positive, they attribute those to the goals that they have, and they make a causal connection, even if one may not be warranted, depending upon the underlying research design. But program theory really breaks open this black box, and you can use it with any kind of research design, whether it's a rigorous experimental design, quasi, or non-experimental. So this miracle that in the middle here is going to be the program's theory that we break down, and we're going to do that by using early and intermediate objectives. If you really know the project and its underlying rationale, then it's not really a miracle. It's a culmination of a lot of hard work that's based on a theory as to why you think your work will result in the desired outcomes. Defining why your program should work and making that theory that underlies your project explicit lays the foundation upon which you can foster continuous improvement. You can focus your data collection, which and have mid-course corrections for your work, which is what's termed formative evaluation. It's about forming and shaping what you're doing with data. And also facilitates the measurement of effectiveness, which is termed summative evaluation. It's really got that sum in the word. So it's about looking at long-term and using data to make decisions about the future of the work that you're doing. Do you have positive outcomes? Are you going to scale it up? Do you need to make changes because you don't have the outcomes that you expect? So your goals, your theory includes your goals, which are what the program intends to accomplish, your strategies, which is how your program will accomplish these goals, and the theory or assumptions that link the two. So why should the program work? How do the strategies and activities relate to the long-term goals? Theory is that linkage between the strategies and goals. It's a set of assumptions as to why a program should work. And taken together, all those assumptions are the basis of the program's theory. It's really important to document that relationship clearly to make it explicit, as it's really the basis for embedding evaluation and measurement of the work that you're doing, how well your work is progressing. These assumptions are made up of early and intermediate objectives, and objectives tend to be a little more specific than goals. They're often early objectives, intermediate objectives, what you would expect to measure on your way towards reaching a long-term goal. One final component of program theory are contextual conditions and resources. What conditions or resources are necessary for the program to operate? Does a certain infrastructure need to be in place? Do you need specialized equipment in order for your program to take place? Do you have the resources, time, human and financial, to complete the project? Do you need people with a certain skill set, and are you making the assumption that they are available to you? One of the criticisms of program theory and logic modeling is that it is an oversimplification. And looking at contextual conditions and resources, looking at maybe external factors, external pressures that may affect the work, it's important so that it's not an oversimplification. A logic model is an oversimplification if we let it be and we make the assumption ourselves that this is our program and it's operating in isolation. But it's important to look at contextual conditions, to look at what's necessary for the program to work and what influences the program's effectiveness. So here's an example of a program that I evaluated that's intended to increase the number of children with autism spectrum disorder or other developmental disabilities receiving early intervention services. So MCHAT is a tool that physicians can use with young children to screen for children who are at risk for developmental disabilities. This is a simplified example. It just includes one strategy, which is training, and one long-term goal, which is increasing the number of children who receive early intervention services. I will show you a full logic model later that pushes this out a little further of why is that important? that children receive early intervention services. The theory linking the MCHAT training to the goal, increasing the number of children who receive early intervention services, is something that we would brainstorm. What needs to happen along the way? If there's, we might ask ourselves, if we provide training, what comes next? The training would need to be available for people. People would have to have access to it. And then if people have access to it, then people would have to attend the training, participate in the training. If physicians participate in the training, what do we hope that they'll gain from the training? It may be that they gain some kind of knowledge. And for this theory, we have that they'll increase the use of the MCHAT. And if they increase the use of MCHAT, then that would increase the number of children who are screened, which would increase the number of children who are referred for additional testing, which will increase the number of children being treated, which will ultimately increase the number of children receiving early intervention services. So it's kind of this continuous of, why do I think this objective will lead to the next objective? What happens next? Notice a couple of things here. These first two objectives there, availability and participation, they are about the opportunity for the strategy to be successful. And it's important in our logic model that we don't skip over those. We often assume that, if we say we're going to do training, then of course we've offered it. And if we offer it, then people are going to attend. But I've evaluated programs early in my career where I didn't specifically evaluate these things and found out much further down the road that people didn't attend the training. It wasn't offered at a convenient time. And if people don't attend the training, then that derails you right there. You don't have the opportunity for knowledge to be gained, for people to use whatever you're teaching them in order to have the more substantial types of outcomes you'd like to see later. As the theory gets a little more involved, just keep asking yourself why. Why do they attend the training? What do they get out of it? If they use the MCHATs, what's the next step? So it's a brainstorming. Here's an example of the program theory just written out in paragraph form, which is just providing training will increase the availability of training, which will in turn increase the number of physicians who participate in the training, increasing the number who participate, and then so forth to our long-term goal of increasing the number of children receiving early intervention services. From this theory, we can create a logic model. So a logic model is a representation, a graphical representation of your theory. It explains why the strategies and activities will result in your goals. It's a process. The resulting model is a communication tool about the work that you're doing. And it's also the foundation of the evaluation, building measurement into the model. There's really no one way to create a logic model. Many people create a tabular model. You've probably seen those tables that are based on the Kellogg framework. There's models that have, I'm going to show you one that has 4 different areas. There's models that have more areas than that. You can include a lot of details or very few details. I'll show you an example of a detailed logic model, and then one that's more of a theory of change, which is at a higher level. Okay. I tend to prefer graphical logic models because they explicitly show theory relationships, as opposed to a table where you might just list your outcomes, list your strategies, and then list early outcomes, list intermediate outcomes, list long-term goals. With a graphical logic model, you're actually showing the relationship between those. And to me, it just makes it more explicit and really helps, again, as a communication tool, showing other people why your program is important, what your research is intending to accomplish. Even if you're only working on the measurement on the first part of your research, down the road, why it's important, putting that in context is something your model can show. So here's just sketched out an example of that program theory. Again, this is a simplified example where you have one strategy and one long-term goal, and just sketching it out on paper where, you know, the strategy leads to an early objective, which leads to intermediate objectives, which leads to long-term goals. And then I put my models into Lucidchart, and it looks more professional, and I will show you more about Lucidchart. I typically use certain shapes for my logic model. You can use whatever shapes that you want to use, but just so when you see my model, you'll know what the shapes refer to. For strategies and activities, I denote by rounded rectangles, early and intermediate objectives by regular rectangles or squared corners, and then long-term goals by elongated ovals. So here is an example. It's probably small on your screen, but I think you'll at least be able to see that there's 4 headings: strategies, early objectives, intermediate objectives, and long-term goals. And then you can see the relationships between how the strategy leads to long-term goals, which leads to early objectives, and then intermediate objectives, and then long-term goals. This is a program that it was called Act Early. It was actually AERD, Act Early, Read Daily, that I evaluated. It's very similar to the MCHAT example that I gave you. Whereas MCHAT was targeted at training physicians, this early intervention training program was targeted at parents and caregivers and organizations that serve parents and caregivers. It's also based on the ASQ, the Ages and Stages questionnaire, as opposed to the MCHAT. The MCHAT's the modified checklist for autism and toddlers. They're both developmental screening tools used by pediatricians to assess children. The ASQ, which is what this program was focused on, is done at 9, 18, 24, and 30 months. The MCHAT is done at 18 and 24. And research has shown that both of these tools are effective screeners for autism and other developmental disabilities. Note that here the strategies I have in green rounded rectangles. The early and intermediate objectives I have in yellow, and they're squared out cornered rectangles. And then the long-term goals I have in blue. I have an ultimate long-term goal in pink, and that's just to show the primary purpose of this program, which is improved health for children. So also note that not everything on your logic model will necessarily be measured. Evaluation would be prioritized based on available resources. So some goals may not be measured because they would occur far after the work that you're doing on your project, but they're provided on the model because a logic model, while it's used to plan for your measurement, is also a communication tool. It's a way to help others understand what you're doing and why. It can help foster buy-in and commitment. It's important to do this. It's important to pull the theory out to a meaningful long-term goal. So whomever you use your model with can really understand the work that you're doing, which could be early on in the model, and its relationship to a real substantive, meaningful goal. It may be that you are using it as a communication tool with potential funders, the public, maybe policymakers, but it's putting the work in context. So I'm going to show you Lucidchart. I have some directions here in case you want to create a free account and kind of follow along. I'm going to talk a little bit about it and show some examples before I do a demonstration. But if you wanted to set up a free account, it's www.lucidchart.com. Lucidchart's a visual communication and diagramming software. It can be used for many purposes, including flowcharts, mind maps, theories of action, theories of change, and logic modeling. It also has organization chart templates. It's got a lot of different shapes in there, and I'll show you some of those when I demo it. If you'd like a free account, you can sign up. If you are an educator, you can get a free educational upgrade. I'm not sure about for nonprofits. There may be free upgrades for nonprofits. I had the free account. Now I pay for it because I use it extensively. I also use it in the courses that I teach for my students to learn how to create logic models graphically using Lucidchart. Once you create an account, you'll have a blank diagram when you go in. It looks like graph paper with shapes along the left side. And at the end of the session, I'll do a demo. And between now and then, I'll give you a little bit of time if you decide to create an account to follow along with the demo. This just shows you when you start putting shapes onto the paper within Lucidchart, how your logic model can start to take form. Here's another example of a logic model. This is from a program that I evaluated called Family Shade. You can see with this one, I use the same shapes, but I use different colors. And this one has 6 strategies, which is governance, mini grants that were given out through the project, resources and support, technical assistance. And it shows how each of these would lead to a long-term goal. For instance, for the technical assistance one, if there's an increased availability of that technical assistance and training for organizations, that would lead to increased participation, which would lead to an increased capacity of community-based organizations to innovate, implement, and evaluate, which leads to the increased likelihood of successful mini grants based on sound planning and management, which leads to improved services. And hopefully you're kind of following along, and I'd be happy to provide these slides too, in case you'd like a copy of them. And so you can see how the theory relates to the long-term goal. This is the one for ACCEL, which is mentioned at the beginning. I co-lead the evaluation of the ACCEL program with Dr. Mary Colnane. This is more of a theory of change, similar to a logic model, but a little bit higher level. I don't have all of the really fine early and intermediate objectives here, but it gives you a general overview of what the theory is, the underlying theory of what the ACCEL program does and what it hopes to accomplish. So the ACCEL program intends to improve the health of Delawareans in areas that are important to Delaware, the areas of greatest need. And I have those listed here: health equity, access to healthcare, cancer, chronic disease, women's health, maternal and child health, mental and behavioral health, obesity, social determinants of health, and substance abuse. And ACCEL does this through, I have 7 strategies listed here: funding through different grants, pilot grants, MRDA grants, professional development through our professional development core with training, networking, and mentoring. Certain strategic hires are made, faculty hires, bird support, which is what this session is a part of, to build skills and strengthen the research, a community engagement core to promote health and health equity, and then we evaluate, and then there's a governance put into place. And so this shows how each of these things that the program is doing come together to meet these long-term goals. The strategies are blue boxes along the left, and I've aligned them with the overall aims of ACCEL. The first column of objectives, the white boxes just to the right of the blue boxes, are primarily internal metrics, some of those early objectives, early outcomes we hope to see. The middle column with that blue box around it with 3 sets of objectives, they assess really effectiveness. So getting past the internal metrics, how effective are all of these things, and increasing communities of research and learning, of improving collaborations, increasing the relevance, volume, and rigor of research, and decreasing barriers to research productivity and effectiveness, which are all important things for the ACCEL program. The next group of objectives get further on to impact, what the effectiveness of the collaborations that we have, the improved research that's focused on health equity, and an enhanced research infrastructure. which would then in turn to lead to new therapies, enhanced technologies and knowledge, which would then lead to the improved health that that ACCEL hopes to accomplish. I'll go back to this really quick because I know most of you are researchers here, I think, and even though this looks, I'm talking about it in a causal way, and it's sometimes called a causal map. The only way that you can make causal assertions is really based on the underlying research design. So, if with this type of systems change initiative, it would be impossible to do an experimental design. Um, and for some programs, it's very difficult to do experimental design or even quasi-experimental. And then when you don't have that, having something to guide the measurement so that you can understand the intentions of what you're doing and what you hope to accomplish can really help just build evidence of the effectiveness of certain strategies towards reaching your long-term goals. So I just wanted to put that out there. Um, I don't want you to walk away thinking that even though I'm talking about it causally, that I know that you can make causal assertions. We can't unless we have an underlying experimental design. And with some large systems change initiatives, you can't do that. Just to touch on the next step with embedded evaluation, it's to plan the work that you're doing based on your logic model. So you've defined your project and why you expect the project to work, and you've defined that using outcomes. And the next step would be to embed measurement into that. And so I just wanted to quickly share a tool that I use. It's called an evaluation matrix that would then take every component on your logic model and develop indicators for those and targets, what data source you're going to use to measure them, the data collection, when you're going to collect data, from whom you're going to collect data, and you could also add a data analysis column, how you're going to analyze the data. So creating that evaluation matrix based on your logic model embeds evaluation into the theory that you've created in your model. It makes explicit how and when you're going to measure each component of your logic model. So just to wrap this up before I go to the demonstration, a logic model explains how you expect a program's strategies and activities to result in the stated goals and objectives. It's a graphical representation of your program theory, at least the way that we're using it. You can create tabular logic models. It's a process, and the model that's created through the process describes your program, and it's also used to design your evaluation to determine what you're going to measure and when. LucidChart is a visual communication software through which you can create logic models as well as flowcharts and other diagrams. An evaluation matrix can then be used to embed measurement into your program theory by taking each component on your logic model or each component that you intend to measure, depending upon resources, depending upon timing of your project. You may not be measuring all components on your logic model. As I said, it's a communication tool to show why your project's important. So it may have outcomes that are beyond the work that you're going to be doing. And then the evaluation matrix has indicators, targets, data sources, data collection methods that are all tied to these components on the logic model. So I'm going to exit out of this and I'm going to go into LucidChart. You're welcome to follow along if you've set up an account. If not, you're welcome to listen to this later too because it's being recorded, and you can follow along later. Okay, let's see here. Okay, can you guys see that? I hope that's a yes.
Yes.
If not, let me know. Okay, thank you. Okay, so when you get into LucidChart, you have this blank graph paper. I have something already here. I'll show you if I wanted to do a new one, I could, let's see. When you first get in, you might see something like this. You wouldn't have a list of documents, and then you could click on New. And I have both Lucid Chart and something called Lucid Spark, which is virtual whiteboarding. I don't know that you'd have Lucid Spark on your free account, but I create a blank document. You can also create them from a template, and this is what you would start with. I put, just as a reminder to me, some things that I want to show you and using Lucid Chart. So if I wanted to drag a shape over to my model, I've got different shapes along the sides. So if I want to pull over a rectangle, I've got that. I can double click and type inside the shape here. And then if I want to go to the next line, you can do Control Enter and it goes to the next line. I just tell you that because it was something it took me a very long time to figure out. So it's a helpful tip. You can also use a lot of features just like word processing. So I could bold this, I could italicize it, I could underline it. I can change the color of my text. I can add bullets under here. If I want to add a bullet here, I could add bullets, numbers, and so forth within a box. I will sometimes for my strategies, as opposed to just having the name of the strategy or the group of activities, I will include the name and then I'll include some bullets that explain what we're doing as part of that. So if one of your strategies is a certain area of research that you're looking at, you could explain in more detail in the box of, what that entails. You can change the shape and the color. So I have a bucket here. I could change it to blue. I can also change the outline color of it as well. So there's a lot of things I can do with my shapes. One of the things I like with Lucid Chart is, let me pull another shape over here. I used to do my logic modeling in Word a long time ago, before I found about Lucid Chart. I've also used, Microsoft has a tool that you can use, but it's fairly expensive, which is why I use Lucid Chart. But when you pull this over, I can pull arrows from one to the other just by hovering over it and clicking on it. And then if I want to move a box, my arrow moves with it, which is something that with Microsoft Word, if I wanted to change out my logic models, the arrows didn't move with the boxes, so you were moving every little piece of it. I also can round corners. Remember, I talked about using rounded rectangles. For this one right here, shape options, I can round my corners of my shape where I have more rounded corners. If I want rectangles with squared corners, I can bring that down to 0, and now I've got squared corners. And again, please just ask a question. If I'm doing something and you say, I don't understand what you clicked on, just let me know. You can also create, there's a text box here. When I do my headings for my logic model, I might do them across where I have strategies. And I pull this all the way across. Early objectives, intermediate objectives, long-term goals. I could also put, the title of my logic model and what that is up above that. Just like with any of the other shapes, I could change the font color. I could change anything within these. I of course would make more space in between. So strategies all the way to the left, long-term goals is all the way to the right. You also can do work with arrows. So I have this arrow here. I could type text along the arrow. I can change what the arrow looks like. I can change the direction of the arrow if I wanted to go in another direction. I also can change how my arrow is. So this right here in between the one picks and the arrow lines, it allows me, if I don't want squared arrows, I want arrows that are kind of rounded. Or let's say I prefer to have just a straight line. You can change how your arrows are on your logic model. You also, one of the features I like, if you have a logic model that's got a lot of different components to it, and let's see here. And then I want to, let's say I pull this up to here, and I pull this to here, and I've crossed lines. One thing that I can do is jump. So it puts a little jump over it. So it's clear that, you're not hitting this line and going to two different boxes. You're jumping over it to go to another line. I try to avoid jumps as much as possible, but with complex logic models, sometimes there's no way around it. A nice feature that I found after working with it for a long time is if you have certain things on your logic model, let's say you've created a whole bunch of boxes and shapes, and then you want to move them. You want to move them down, or you want to make your whole logic model bigger. I can draw a circle. I can draw a square. I'm just holding down my mouse and dragging, and it takes everything and allows me to move everything all at once, which is really nice as opposed to having to move each piece. I also want to show you the shape library. There are lots of other shapes. Let's say you don't want to use this for logic modeling, or you want different types of shapes on your logic model. I can click on more shapes. And these are all the different types of shapes. It has equations that you can put in there, floor plans if you wanted to create a floor plan, dynamic shapes. See, I use the flowchart and geometric for logic modeling and the standard shapes. It does have mind maps, which I have used this for as well, and provides a shape for mind maps. I've also used this to create organization charts. I have one for my organization that I created using Lucidchart. Process engineering shapes. You can create tables. You can create sort of a Gantt chart with a timeline. You can create Venn diagrams. And I've left these two up here. Let me put equations on here too. So if I click these and then I say use selected shapes, it adds them to my shape list here. I've got my flowchart, I've got my timeline now, my Venn diagrams, different equations that I can use. The last thing I wanted to show you is once you've got your logic model, you've probably noticed when I move things over, it expands my canvas. I have it set up so it just has one landscape, 8.5 by 11 canvas. But if your logic model gets bigger, you can expand across. And then, like I told you, if you want to change everything, let's say I do this and I want to make it smaller so it's on one canvas, I can do something like that, and it changes it back to one canvas. So once I'm ready, I want to print something out. I can go to File, and I can export. And it allows me to export to PDF or certain image file types, PNG, JPEG, or SVG. It also works with other software as well. Visio is you'll see at the bottom, Visio is the Microsoft software package that you can create logic models with, which is a really nice package, but I found that it's more expensive. So I can export, let's say I want to export to PDF. It gives me some things like I can crop it to content, or I can custom crop it if I want. Let's say I really just want to print out this part on my PDF. I'm going to pull it back out. And these are the different file types. I can make it an accessible PDF, and then I say download, and it takes this and creates, oh, where did that go? Creates my my PDF for it. The export feature, I don't believe is part of the free Lucidchart. You can create a free account, and with the free account, you can put so many shapes on your model and kind of experiment with it. You can create a model, but not one with tons of shapes on it. I don't think that you can export, but if you're able to get a free education account, you can use the export feature and have unlimited shapes if you're an educator. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and open it up for any questions that you might have.
So we'll certainly open it up to questions as well, but I just wanted to thank you again very, very much for sharing your expertise with us as you have done many times before, but this is always wonderful. Always learn something new from you, and thank you again. Claudine,
Thank you.
over to you for any Q&A if you'd like.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much, Sue. This was really amazing. And again, I totally agree with Omar. I learned a lot again. There are just in the chats some people were really interested in having copies of your slides. So we will send them. And
yes.
Do you have any comments on this? No problem.
If someone thinks of a question later, you're welcome to email me. My email address is just my last name, Giancola @udel.edu. I'm happy to respond to emails. And if you're creating a logic model and want me to take a look at it and need help, just let me know.
Oh, great. I'll take advantage of this.
Sue, that's very helpful. So Claudine, what we could do is in the minutes, excuse me, we can put Dr. Giancola's email information, and Joanna can also embed a link to the PowerPoint, and that can be accessed perhaps as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Please use the PDF that I just sent you, Lacey and Claudine. That PDF is the most recent one.
Of course, will do. Thanks, Sue.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a couple of questions. So in the previous logic models that I used or that I saw, there were the columns were, for example, resources, and then they were objectives, and then early and process outcomes, and at the end, long-term outcomes. And I noticed that you don't use that type of headings. I love the strategy, early, objective.
Yeah.
What do you think of these various, columns?
I do sometimes use them. The tabular logic model format usually has inputs, activities, outputs, and then it has short and long-term outcomes and long-term goals. I will sometimes add inputs or resources on a column to the left of my strategies, and maybe just put little brackets around it and list the contextual conditions or list the resources or inputs there. I also will sometimes add an output column to the right of my strategies before my early objectives. For instance, if one of the strategies is about the development of a curriculum, I might put as an output the curriculum, or I might put as an output some of the counts, the number of people who went to training and that sort of thing, and then follow after that with early objectives, what you hope to get out of the training, and then what that would lead to. So I absolutely do use some of those headings. Sometimes it depends on the program, and if I'm creating like a full logic model or a theory of change.
Understood.
Hi, Kathleen.
Kathleen?
Hi, Sue. It's nice to see you.
Hi, it's
been
good
a
to
little
see
while.
you. I know it has been.
Thank you so much for coming and talking more about logic models and embedded evaluation. I was curious, in the logic models, the ways that you use strategies. I'm more familiar with using activities and putting those there. And I was just wondering if you could explain just a little bit more about the use of strategies versus activities by itself.
Yeah, I will sometimes, I'll sometimes use the term activities, but if you have a program that has a lot of activities, you wouldn't want to list all of those on your logic model because it makes it really cumbersome. So then I'll try to group activities and I'll group those into strategies. So my strategies might be groups of activities, maybe different types of training or different types of interventions that might be targeted at a certain audience. What I showed you the logic model for ACCEL, I kind of had the strategies as what each of the cores of ACCEL are doing, like the PD core. So within that, they're providing professional development, but they're doing that through many different activities. So the strategies really are groups of activities, but you could certainly use the activities in the heading, depending upon what works best for your model.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other question? Well, I have other questions, but just wanted to make sure that we're not missing anyone. So I'm not sure. So when you describe the evaluation matrix, I'm not sure I understood what you put in these various cells there. What is the evaluation matrix?
Yeah, if I was looking at my logic model and let's say one of them was increased participation in training, I would put in my evaluation matrix, in the logic model component, increased participation in training. And then I would develop indicators. My indicator might be the number of people who attended training. And then if I have targets, some programs don't have targets, but many times if you're writing a proposal, you have to have targets in the proposal. So it might be by a certain date, so many people will be trained. So if you have a target, you can include that there. The data source column would be where I'm going to gather that information. So if I'm looking at the number of people trained, it might be from attendance logs or sign-in sheets or something like that. And then that last column about collection, it could be that, I am going to collect attendance sheets after each training and analyze them using basic descriptive statistics. So it would really, it's kind of like if you look at your logic model and you clicked on each component on your logic model, it provides more information about how I'm going to measure that, if there's a target, what the target is, what data source, what data I'm going to use to measure it, and how and when I'm going to collect it and analyze it.
I see. Okay, so you don't put numbers in there. It's not results. It's not a count of people who attended that training or something like that. It's really a description.
I don't
of
put the
what you're going
data.
to
It's
do.
really a plan. Yeah,
I
it's
see.
really a
It's a plan.
plan for how I'm going to operationalize my logic model, how I'm going to use that, how I'm going to embed, the measurement of data and within each of those components of my logic model. So it's my plan for measurement.
I see. Any other questions? Question? All right. So I don't see any other questions, and Lacey put Sue's email in the chat, and please start doing logic model. Maybe we could compare, have discussions.
There's lots of different ways to do them. There's no
I
one
know.
right way.
I know.
Yeah. Thank
I
you,
love
everyone.
logic
I
models.
appreciate you listening in.
Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
Bye,
Take
everyone.
care.